Hi Noteboard Gamers, and welcome back to Noteboard Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be doing one of my very occasional Cult of the Old review videos. And when I say very occasional, I mean really occasional. I started them with the intention of potentially every 3 or 4 months doing a Cult of the Old review and looking at old games. I think this is only the third one I've done in 2 years though. And what a one it is, because I want to take you through a game that was on my Grail game list for many months. In fact, I think I was searching for it on eBay for about 9 months before I found it at a price that I was willing to pay for it. And of course, I am talking about Camp Grizzly, the wonderful, fun adventure game where you're being stalked by a slasher in a youth camp, in a summer camp called Camp Grizzly, and you as camp counsellors have got to evade the slasher before he tracks you down and slaughters each and every one of you. This game is a lot of fun, but it is a game that's on many people's Grail lists. Why is that? Why is it such a Grail game for so many people? You see, the story of Camp Grizzly is that it came to Kickstarter in October 2013, fittingly on October the 31st, 2013, obviously in the early flushes of the board game industry in Kickstarter. And it was marketed pretty well. It did okay, and I say okay for the time. You see, it made about $60,000 on Kickstarter, which these days is obviously not a massive amount. And the base game at the time would cost around, I think it was about 44 quid, the equivalent of 44 pounds. I mean, trust me, it multiplies many times now for the base game if you want to get the base game. The artwork was done by an artist who works for Pixar, a guy called Austin Madison, and he did the artwork on some of the cards, and we'll look at that in a bit. And the colourist was Jordi Belair, who was a Marvel colourist, so it had some real pedigree behind it. And that absolutely shows in the art direction of the game. It came and it had a number of expansions you could back in the Kickstarter. There were some minis that you could get as well. And yeah, it did okay. It funded with $60,000. And then it was shipped to backers. And that was practically the last that anybody ever heard from Ameritrash Games. And I don't know what caused it to catch the kind of public consciousness, what made it this kind of game that you must have. Because there are lots of games that have limited print runs on Kickstarter and don't go anywhere. But this really captured people's imagination. And I think as we go through the review, you'll see that it's a relatively easy game to play. But most of all, it's a really fun game to play. So now kind of we fast forward somewhat 8 years from there. And as I say, I was hunting this down for about 9 months on eBay, and I've seen prices go absolutely crazy wild on this. We're talking kind of $400 for the base game. I didn't pay $400 for the base game, nowhere near that amount. Trying to find the expansions, I think there are 5 expansions, is like trying to find hen's teeth. It's just impossible. Trying to find the minis for it, yes, you could have got minis with the Kickstarter, is again nigh on impossible. I have never seen them come up on my eBay searches, so if anybody's out there wanting to offload their expansions and minis, then please reach out and get in touch with me. So yeah, it's for whatever reason, people really want this game, and you see it pop up on Grail Games list. And I will say, as a solo player, I played it true solo. That's not the best way to play it, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But yeah, it captured the imagination. People want this game. People want to see how this game plays and what you do in Camp Grizzly, what makes it so special. And I think it's just a culmination of nothing too flashy. The theme, which, you know, we all love, kind of a 70s, late 70s, early 80s slasher film. The mechanics and the fact that all of that just meshes together with this wonderful evocative artwork and makes it a lot of fun. In fact, the people that have got the game, like myself, I'm not going to sell this. I'm never going to sell this game. I don't care what offer that comes in for me for this, and that's why it's a little bit rare to find, is it's not a game that's freely distributed on the second-hand market. So, what is Camp Grizzly? Like good slasher films, there's never really too much reason as to why the protagonist, and I'll come on to what he's called and what he does in a wee while, is doing exactly what he's doing. If you've watched Friday the 13th, the original, or the shocking remakes, or maybe the subsequent sequels to Friday the 13th, or any kind of the late 70s, early 80s slasher films, and I'm going through a real renaissance at the moment on Shudder, the kind of horror channel. I'm watching things like Slumber Party Massacre and all the great ones. Then you'll know that this is a game where youths are stuck in a camp and they're being chased for an inexplicable reason by a killer. This wonderful little rule book that you get, and it is a really pretty dinky rule book. It's almost like a small comic, tells us that it's 1979 and the counsellors at Camp Grizzly are enjoying Jodie's guitar by the campfire. Chet left to check on the generator an hour ago. He should have been back by now. Then he appeared, the man in the bear mask. With a subtle nod, he tossed Chet's severed head into the campfire before splitting Becky in half. Who, if anyone, will survive the night in Camp Grizzly? That really just sets all the tone that you need for the game itself. Now, it is a game for 1 to 6 players, and you all take the role of camp counsellors who are being stalked through a maze of cabins and camp trails by Otis. And Otis is, in fact, our bare-faced killer. And we can see on the back of Otis's card, there's a bear mask there. And if we look at the front, you can see a wonderful picture of Otis on his card. Yes, you're being stalked through the maze of cabins and camp trails by Otis, a homicidal killer with an unhealthy bear fetish. Stay alive while cooperating with other players to collect a combination of objective tokens required to begin one of the game's finales. Those who survive the finales win. And that's right. You see, throughout the game, there are various kind of tokens scattered throughout the game, these objective tokens here, and you don't know what they are. You've got to go and explore them to try and unearth them. You see, there are 4 areas in the game that you've eventually got to get to trigger the finale. There's the barn. There's the boat, there's the ranger tower, and there's the van. And if we look at the bottom here, just on the van on this one, it gives you a number of icons, and these are the particular kind of objectives you've got to find out. So for example, here I need the keys, I need a gas can, and I need a car battery. So if you had got this particular objective token, which is the keys, that would be great. Once you've got all 3 of those, you can head towards the relevant objective, the relevant location where you've got the objective tokens for, and then you can trigger the finale. Now, the game comes with, as I say, there are these 4 locations, and each of these locations has 2 cards, and you randomly choose 1 card at the beginning. And the back of each card is a separate finale, and I don't really want to spoil them for you at this stage, but each finale, when you get to these locations, that's not the end of the game. You see, the finale is very different for each and every one, and you've got to survive the finale to actually win the game. Once you've done that, then that's it. That's job done. Now you do it cooperatively. You all want to get there. You'll be passing tokens to each other, and you'll be trying to uncover new kind of tokens in the map itself and in the camp itself. But all the while, you're going to be stalked by Otis. That's right, the killer is after you. And he starts off relatively weak and relatively kind of lame. He may move a couple of spaces. And as the game progresses, Otis is going to get stronger and faster. And as he gets stronger and faster, he's going to hunt you down more and more. And trust me on this, if you're playing with multiple characters, some of them are going to die. As a solo player, say do not play it pure solo. I'll come on to why later. It just doesn't really work great. You can play it, it's just not the best game. Play it with 2 or 3 characters and you get the interplay from there, but just trust me, some of them will die and you may well have to sacrifice some of those characters. So, that's kind of the overview on the game. It's a slasher coming after you. He's going to use whatever he can find to stave your head in, to kind of stab you through the face, to gut you, to throw you in boiling water, to drown you. Whatever he's going to do, he's going to claw you to death. You're going to be mangled up and thrown away. And he's going to do whatever he can to do that. And it's your job to evade him, collect the objective tokens, get to the location, unearth the finale that you can get, that you're going to unearth there, and then defeat the finale. Anybody who is surviving at the end of that has won the game. And let me tell you, It's not as easy as it sounds. Okay, so here we have the game of Camp Grizzly set up. A solo game, but I'm going to play as 3 characters. And the 3 characters I've chosen are CJ, Jody, and Karen. And you can see them. There they are. They are actually in the campfire area. Over to the left of them, Otis always starts in the tools shed. Now, when you set the game up, there is this card that you can choose which game you want to set up. We have a normal difficulty and an easy difficulty as well. I've set it up on normal difficulty. It tells you where you're going to put the objective tokens, and where you're going to put the kind of locks as well, and also it's going to tell you where you start the body count and the body count marker, because down here at the bottom of the board here we have the body count, and this is how Otis is going to get a little bit stronger as the game goes on. You see, every time somebody dies, and that could be a counsellor, it could be cameos, it could be a camper, there's other ways that other things can die, is the body count tracker is going to move up, and every time it moves up, it affects Otis's stats. So because we're playing on the normal difficulty, it says at the bottom there that I have to start the body count at number 1. If I do that, you can see it's going to cover up stalk +1. So that means that instead of starting on stalk 1, Otis will start on stalk 2, and that means he will move 2 turns every go. He's still using the D4 dice for his attack, and his damage is only 1. So if he does get to attack anybody early on in the game, he's going to do relatively minor damage, but he's going to catch up to them fairly frequently. So if we look at the counsellors themselves, let's have a look at CJ. We can see the CJ card just here. So it says, Coach, other counsellors in your cabin receive a +1 to their fight rolls, which is really good. That means when they're fighting, if they're in the same cabin as you, then they get a +1 on whatever their fight rolls are. And then Sprinter, when moving, CJ may discard a survival card to move 1 more space. And I'll show you survival cards in a bit. And over here, you have the move and the health tracker, and they're kind of linked together. Now, you get these little ring markers for them, and of course when the game starts, they start on the highest one, which is a 3, and that means he will have 3 move points each go, and his health will be 3, but every time he takes a damage, he's going to move down one of these, and you can see it'll go to 2 move points, then it'll go to 1 move point, then just before they die, it goes up a little bit. There's a bit of adrenaline running in there so they can move a little bit further, but then down at the bottom, of course, there is death, and when they reach that, that's it, the counsellor is dead, and the body count will move up. Over here is panic, and this is if they're fighting Otis and they lose to Otis, then they're going to move 2 spaces, or in a panic situation, CJ is going to move 2 spaces away from where Otis is. In fact, all 3 of them, CJ, Jody, and Karen, have a panic number of 2. You can see they've all got 3 health as well at the top, and they've all got their slightly asymmetrical kind of way that they their special abilities work. We've set up everything on there, so all the tokens are set up. We've got the 4 kind of areas where locations where they can go to. Over here are cameos, and these are characters that are going to go onto the board, and they are possibly going to have some negative effects for the counsellors, but also they obviously give Otis the ability to kill them if he lands in the same space, and if he does, that means that the body count is going to go up as well, so it's another way of getting the body count up. And there we go, Detective Haddon, Donald Pleasance from Halloween maybe, who knows. Also in this deck of cabin cards, there's going to be some campers that you're going to pull out as well. That's another way of increasing the body count, but of course that also comes with potentially the fact that they can offer you some bonuses as well. The final thing that we need to do in terms of the setup at the moment is that each character is going to draw 2 survival cards. So there are 2 decks of cards. We have the cabin cards, which are over there. You draw one at the end of after each turn, or there's the survival cards, and these are going to help you out. And there's 2 types of survival. There's a single use and a permanent ability. So let's just shuffle these, and we'll draw 2 out for CJ. So 1 and 2. Let's look what he's got. So he's got a single use scream for help, and look at that artwork. It's fantastic. Play when Otis strikes your cabin. Move up to 3 other counsellors in your space to help, and that's good. That means you can bring people to you to help. And this other one, oh, that's good, we've got permanent and a single use, so this is a permanent one. So that single use one, obviously he'll use that, discard that. This he keeps forever, unless he uses his ability to discard one of these to move an extra space. And this says you may move one additional space when you panic. So CJ with these cards will move 2 spaces. Let's have a quick look at what Jody will get. Let's give him a couple of cards. We'll just not go into it in too much depth. They've got 2 single-use ones. Jody has wait for me, play at any time to move to another counsellor space, and also has improvise, play when fighting Otis, attack with a D6 if you are unarmed, and all the characters start unarmed. Here we go. Shuffle Karen's cards. 1, 2, 3. And Karen has, well, she's got a permanent and a single use. She's got a slip past, and we can see Otis there. And CJ's hiding outside. Play during your move phase, move 2 more spaces this turn, and a permanent use, which is draw 1 less card when tempting fate. And tempting fate is something that the character will do at some point in the game if asked to, and I'll explain that if we come across it. Okay, so these survival cards, they're relatively difficult to come by in the game. The deck isn't that thick, but each character starts with 2 survival cards. That's it. We're now ready to start playing Camp Grizzly. So playing the game is an absolute breeze. There are effectively 3 phases for each player in the game. There's the move phase, there's the cabin draw phase, and then there's the end turn, which is some additional actions. And then once each of the counsellors has gone, then Otis will take his turn and start stalking them. However, there are things that are going to happen that maybe bring Otis on a little bit sooner. You see, we'll start off with the move phase then, and what you do is remember each character has got their move points, and we know CJ's got 3. So at the beginning of the game, like this, where we're kind of all starting, the moves are relatively going to be the same more or less every single game. Each one of these areas that I'm pointing to on the board there is an individual square, and that classes as 1 move point. We'll see these paths here, these wood trails here. I'll explain those in a wee while. At the top of the board up here, we have the woods, and characters can get sent into the woods. However, we're going to start off with Otis. He's got 3 move points. He's going to move 3 spaces. So 1, 2, 3. So he's gone to Beaver Cabin, and he's in Beaver Cabin. Now, there's nothing else he can really do. He's not in anywhere with an objective, but of course, a key thing is going to be to try and get these particular keys. So maybe we need to get through here, get an objective token, find out what's there, and then also pick those keys up so we can start unlocking the doors as well. You see, on your turn, you're not actually required to move, although you've got your move points. You can move if you want, but you can also use your move points for other actions as well. So if you can use your move points for also, you can pick up an item, you can pick up weapons, you can pick up keys or campers, and you can use that move point to reveal and pick up objectives in the same space as you. You can also, on your turn, on your move phase, you can trade items, weapons, trade campers and objectives, etc., and keys, blah blah blah. And if you're next to a green nature trail, you can also attempt to use a nature trail, and again I'll talk about that in a bit. So Otis has moved his 3 spaces. There's not a great deal for him to do here. So what he's going to do now is he's now going to do the cabin draw phase, and that's where this big deck of cabin cards comes into play. You see this is kind of, well, it's not a timer mechanism, this is kind of the one of the core functions of the game. In here, there could be campers which can aid you. There could be items you can use. There could be weapons you can use. There could be a first aid kit. There could be kind of encounters which make it difficult, and also there are a fairly high number of Otis strikes cards, and that's going to bring Otis directly to you. So it's always a little bit scary on the first move. Let's see what happens on his first go. Oh, and he's lost in the woods. So there we go. So CJ is lost in the woods. Right at the beginning here, it says move to the woods and follow the lost directions on your next turn. So what we're going to do is CJ is in this cabin, but already he's gone up to the woods, and what I have to do, I'll explain that when we get around to his turn, is I have to roll the d6, and that determines the outcome there. So that wasn't really a successful first go for CJ, and now already the campers have been split. So let's move on to Jody now. Jody's abilities are he's a loner. He can +1 to his fight roll if he's alone, and then when he's crossing paths with a cameo, Jody may roll a d6, okay? And there we go. So we're going to move him around here instead. So he's got 3, 1, 2, 3. He's in the same space as where CJ was, but of course CJ got moved on. Again, there's not a great deal for Jody to do at this stage, so we shall just roll, shuffle and draw the cabin cards and see what he gets. And what's he got? Oh god, it's a red one. Okay, this says, the claw. It belonged to Jeremy, the groundskeeper. How long do you suppose it would take to kill a person with something like this? Said Detective Haddon. Increase Otis's damage stat to 1 by 1. So, oh my god, so when he catches up to people, we've increased his damage stat, he's going to do 2 damage. And it also says, put an objective token in the tool shed. And that's really good, because that shows us just how this works. So we'll find the tool shed, that's where Otis is. At some point when somebody goes in there, there's an additional objective token there. So now we're going to go on to Karen. I don't want to split the campers. So in reality, Karen she could go up to the little cub cabin, but that is splitting the campers. We're kind of going to keep them together because it doesn't really matter. Otis is going to be moving 2 and gaining fast on them. So we'll do 1, 2, 3. So there we go. We've got Karen and Jody together in Beaver Cabin. We have CJ lost in the woods, and pretty soon it's going to be Otis's turn, but of course we have to do Karen's draw for the cabin card. So let's see what happens. Oh, it's another red one. These don't work well. So what does this say? This says bleed out. And this says Otis stabs you from the shadows and disappears. Remove Otis from the board. That's okay. So remove him from the board. I'll explain what happens on his go next. Place this card in front of you. At the end of your turn, roll a d4. If it's a 1, you receive 1 injury. Discard bleed out when you heal an injury. So, well, Karen, every turn, she's got to roll a d4. So we're at the end of her turn. Let's roll it. If it's a 1, she's going to get an injury. The only way she can cure this is by finding a way to heal under our first aid places. It's a 1. That's rubbish. So Karen has already got, move her down here, Karen has already got an injury. So she's moved now from having a health of 3 down to, and movement of 3 down to 2 there. She's already sustained her first injury. Let's hope that doesn't carry on for each and every turn for her. So there we go. That's our 3 camp counsellors who've taken their turn now. Now it's going to be Otis's turn. So Otis would, if he was on the board, obviously that card that we drew, this bleed out card, removed him from the board. If he was on the board, he would move the number of stalk spaces towards the closest counsellor that he can find. That would mean obviously over here. However, Otis is off the board. So what we do for Otis being off the board is we're going to roll the D10 and we're going to put him in one of the areas where these paths are. And you can see all these paths have numbers on them, and that's because that's, you know, it's where you can roll and things will appear, etc. But that's also where Otis is going to re-enter the map. So let's have a look. He's on number 4, so let's do that. He's going to enter on number 4. So 9, 10, into 4. Oh, he's actually back in the tool shed. So he was off the board. He's now back on the board in exactly the same space, and now he's going to move, and he's going to move his 2 spaces, which is where his stalk figure is there. And we look at this, and he will target the cabin with the fewest campers. If still tied, he will then target the cabin with a horrified counsellor, and these are these horrified tokens over here. If still tied, target the counsellor with the most injuries, and if still tied, choose randomly. Well, he's obviously going to move this way because this is where the counsellors are. He can't get CJ at the moment because CJ is up and above and lost in the woods up here. So Otis is going to stalk his 2 spaces towards these counsellors, and you can see 1, 2, he's already gaining on them. And that's kind of Otis's done here. Now, had he crossed paths with any of these, then he would be, then we would enter a situation where Otis strikes, and there would be combat that takes place. But also, Otis is not kept back by locked doors. So he can move through any of the locked doors, whereas obviously the counsellors, unless they've got the keys, can't move through the locked doors. Right. That's round 1 done. Let's do another round and show you what happens, and I'll probably instigate some combat at some point as well, although none of my counsellors actually have any weapons just yet. So that was the first round done, and what I'll do now is I'll just quickly run through the second round. I want to show you what happens because obviously CJ is lost in the woods, and I'm going to potentially instigate a combat or some form of confrontation with our friend Otis, the slasher, the barefaced slasher. So, back to the beginning then. So everybody's been, Otis has been, that's the round over. We now go back to the beginning. The cards haven't really given us any weapons yet, so all of our counsellors are still unarmed, and of course CJ was kicked over to the woods over there. So if you look over the woods, the first thing you do when you're lost in the woods is you roll a d6. If it's a 1 or a 2, then Otis is going to strike. If it's a 3 or a 4, CJ is going to get an injury, and or if it's a 5 or a 6, nothing happens, and then you roll the d10 to find out which nature trail you're going to go back to. So we're going to roll a d6 and find out what happens with our intrepid explorer in the woods. Here we go. It's a 2. Oh no, Otis is going to strike. Right, so let me just tell you what happens when Otis strikes when you're in the woods, and I shall show you what CJ's powers and cards, if they can do any benefit for him. So Otis is going to move from the beaver cabin up to the woods because that's where CJ is. Now, if CJ had any weapons, we would use a dice for CJ to roll against whatever Otis is going to roll against. Unfortunately, CJ has no weapons at all. Now I could play this card, this single-use card here, as CJ, which says, when Otis strikes your cabin, we're in the woods, move up to 3 other counsellors to your space to help. Well, I could move both Jody and Karen into my space to help me out, but they'd be lost in the woods, they'd be stuck in the same predicament, and neither of them have any bloody weapons. And what's the other thing here? You may move 1 additional space when you panic. So that's okay, that's if I panic. So, what is going to happen is, if we look over here on Otis's card, he's going to roll a d4 because his attack is just on a 4 at the moment. So he's going to roll that d4, and he would have to beat whatever weapon I had to roll against. Unfortunately, I don't have any weapons, so I'm completely unarmed. So it doesn't really matter. Otis is going to win, and he's going to do 2 damage to me. So already, CJ has moved down 2 on the damage. That's not great. However, he's now going to panic, but because he's lost in the woods, he doesn't necessarily panic. What he's going to do is roll a d10 and find out which place he's going to go on. He's going to go on place number 5. So he's panicked and he's run all the way across there to the Lil Cub cabin, and Otis is still in the woods. He'll come back on the board next go. And what he's going to do as well, of course, because he's panicked as well, he's going to also move 2 away from Otis. So let's just do him 1, 2. He's back at the campfire. Wow, that wasn't great for CJ, was it? Really wasn't great for CJ in terms of his turn. He was lost in the woods. Otis struck. He had no weapons. And this happened. Right, so that's his go done. Let's do his camp card. Oh, what does this say? Great, we've got a cameo. Okay, so we've got Officers Jenkins and Taylor. Place the officers on a random nature trail. They stalk 1 towards the closest counsellor. So that's, well, towards the counsellor who drew it, should I say. So that's going to be CJ, so they're going to move towards him. And if they cross paths, so if they are in the same place as the counsellor has to discard a random weapon. Of course, if Otis crosses paths with the officers, both officers are killed, and it's a body count of +1. So we'll put that card there. We'll get their cameo, and we're going to find out on a random nature trail where they're going to be. And they're on number 8, which is 6, 7, 8. There we go. They're alongside Jody and of course Karen, and they're going to move every round towards Otis there, so towards CJ there. Wow, not a great first kind of second round start for CJ. Let's see what happens with Jody now. So Jody's in this particular space. We've got no weapons to discard because we're not crossing paths here. We're going to aim to go over and unearth this particular objective token here. So we'll go 1, 2, and we shall unearth that. And what have we got? Okay, we got a crank, which is that on any of the objectives. If you look here, we need a crank for the ranger tower, we need 1 for the boat, and 1 for the barn. So Jody, has actually got a crank. And yeah, so that's good. He's starting to get his objectives together now. And that's Jody's 3 goes moved. He moved 1, 2, revealed the objective and picked it up, and he's got that on there now. So nothing else he can really do at this stage, so he's going to unearth a card. Oh, great. So Jody's got a weapon. Let me move CJ out of the way. So Jody's got a weapon now then. So Jody has a meat cleaver. And what this does, he can equip this weapon. That means he's now armed for combat. So against Otis, he will roll a d6 plus 1. It's got a little red hand on there, which means it only takes up 1 hand space, so he could carry another one-handed weapon. It says, seems a little big for a camp kitchen. So we're going to equip that onto Jody, just there. He's equipped a weapon. He's good to go now. However, we're now going to move on to we've done his card. We're now going to move on to Karen for her go. So what's going to happen with Karen then? Okay, so Karen's going to try and get to here. So 1, 2, 3. She hasn't quite made it just yet. So she needs to get to where those items, to where those keys are, so she can carry the keys. Of course, keys are used on some of the locations, and we'll see what happens there. Let's draw a card for Karen. There's nothing really else for her to do. Oh man, it's an Otis Strikes card. You really don't want these cards to come out, because Otis, even though he's currently off the board up at the woods, I just want to show you the artwork again on this as well. Look at this wonderful artwork. Otis is going to strike. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. He's come on to where Karen is. Now let's look at Karen. Campers in your care may re-roll. There's no campers there. Oh, I missed this out for Karen. She begins the game with 2 additional survival cards, which is pretty good. So what she got? She's got play at any time and choose. A dead counsellor returns to campfire, or a camper returns to your space. And permanent. You may move 1 additional space during your move phase. So that'll come in for future moves. We'll not retrospectively put it in. But Otis has got there. What else has she got? She's got to do that at the end of her turn. I can move through Otis's space. I could have done that to move 2 spaces this turn and draw 1 less card. Now Otis is going to strike again. She doesn't have a weapon, so she's going to move down 2. Oh my god, she'd already got 1 injury. She's down at 2. Otis has struck her. She's not going to get those keys. She's going to panic 2. She's going to move 1, 2 away from Otis. And now she's also got to do what this particular card says here, this bleed out card, which is roll the d4 and see if she has any, see if she rolls a 1. So let's do that. Thankfully it's a 3 on that, so that's okay. She's not lost any further health there. No, that one's on there. But my god, it's starting to go bad for our guys. And she's drawn an Otis Strikes card. She did a move, drew her Otis Strikes card. She's run away from him. She's now down at 1. She's got on her final health. CJ's not doing much better. He's only got 2 left. Fortunately, Jody has collected an objective, and he's where he is. However, we're now going to move back on to Otis. And of course, he's got stalk 2. He's going to move 2. But he was put in this place here, so he's going to move towards the nearest counsellor, which is, of course, Jody. However, we get some proper combat here. What's going to happen here is Otis is currently on a d4 for his attack, so he's going to roll a d4. And if you remember, Jody has got the meat cleaver, and that means that he's going to roll a d6 plus 1. So that means that Jody's got a really good chance of absolutely not being killed by Otis on this particular go. So before we roll, it's important to say that Otis will win all ties, and of course he's already had a chunk out of CJ, he's had a chunk out of Karen. I could play at any time to move counter into my space, or I can fight Otis, d6 for unarmed, that's okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll these 2 dice and see if the d6 plus 1 can win the d4. Let's hope. Yes! So we got a 2 on the d4, and we got a 6 on the d6. That's great. That means Otis has been defeated in this fight, and all that happens is Otis moves off the board. And of course, we know what happens when Otis moves off the board. On his next round, we're going to roll a d10 to find out where he comes back onto the board. Phew! Okay, so that is a couple of rounds, quick fire rounds done there. we've seen some combat, we've seen some exploration, we've picked up an objective token. 2 of our counsellors are already injured and hurting. We need to find some first aid for them. And this cabin deck is just an utter deck of joy, delight, and absolute bastardism as well, because the things you're going to pull out. So we look at the next card. So what would have happened next? We got a Blood Moon. While the Blood Moon is in play, Otis causes double damage and it lasts 2 rounds. So that's an enduring thing for 2 rounds. We've got He's Toying With Us, where you roll a die. Look at that, there's a chainsaw there as well. There's various cards, and as you can see, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. There's campers in there and all sorts of stuff. That is a couple of rounds of it, and you can see it's a heck of a lot of fun, and playing it with more than one counsellor is certainly the way to go. Obviously, throughout the game I would have then kind of collected all the various objectives, and by collecting the objectives I could have then unearthed one of the finales and done the finale and hopefully won the game. But I hope that gave you a good view on just how much fun Camp Grizzly actually is. So, final thoughts on Camp Grizzly. Look, I think it is an exceptionally fantastic game. It's a pure joy to play this game. Would I play this game as a pure solo player? And the answer is not at all. So if you are going to play this and you play purely solo and you like to play one character, you're probably best off not going for this game. You see, as one character, you don't get to have that interplay of Otis chasing around others on the board. You're just going to run around the board, and it's just going to be a little bit boring. You're going to hunt down objectives and try to collect them, and then try and get to the exit. It's not really recommended to play as a pure, true solo game. So then we come to the next step is, would, as a solo player, even playing multi-handed and multi-characters, would I recommend this game as somebody who purely plays solo? And I don't think so. You see, I've played the game solo, and I've played it with 3 characters, and I've had a good time solo playing the game. The best time I have with this game is when I play with my wife, or I've played with my wife and friends, and you're just having this real kind of joyous experience, this shared experience as you're running around and exchanging goods. And I think, as a solo gamer, it really pains me to say this, that a game that is this good really needs others for it to be enjoyed properly. I don't think as a pure solo gamer, playing with as many characters as you want, that you're going to get as much out of this game. What you want is a group of friends who are up for a bit of a laugh, who don't mind the fact that somebody may die early, but that's okay because they can still kind of almost get involved in the game, and they can still be part of the shared experience here. And I think that's where the game really, really, really shines. So if you've been as a solo gamer like me, and I'm 99% a solo gamer, and you've been considering this as a solo purchase, and because it's such a hefty investment, I really can't heartily recommend it as a solo game. However, as a game that I thoroughly enjoy, I absolutely adore it. It's in my top 5, maybe top 10 games of all time. Not pure solo games, and not solo games, but games that I enjoy, and I would play this with anyone at any time. I have that much fun. I think there's, the simplicity of the mechanisms in the game. It literally is a game where, how many moves you can make is dictated to by what health you've got on your card. And you start off fairly weak, and then you get some wonderful weapons as you get through the game. So who wouldn't like to move from having no weapons at all to having a chainsaw? So you go from having next to nothing, or maybe you're going to be rolling a d4 and suddenly you're rolling a d10 because you've got that chainsaw. And these cards, these Camp Grizzly cards that you get to pull out, they're really, really exciting because you don't know what's going to come out next in the Camp Grizzly cards. Is it going to be some campers who may aid you in the game, but sometimes there's a bit of a kind of a boon to, a kind of a downside to having them there. Maybe it's one of the many cameo characters as well here, like Detective Haddon. So if you look at the Detective Haddon card, now, if you've seen Halloween, then you know the original Halloween. You know it's Donald Pleasance who is the detective in Halloween, and the town that Halloween takes place in is called Haddonfield, and therefore we got a lovely subtle nod to Halloween there. Or maybe you're going to get some sneakers which are going to help you out a little bit, and you're going to get some equipment there. Well, as I say, you could have a lowly pocket knife, but at least you've got something. But of course, sometimes the Otis Strikes card is going to come out of those cabin cards, and that comes out in just the wrong place for you. And I think that is the beauty of the game, is each game starts off and you start racing through and collecting the objective tokens. You think, this is going to be easy. There's got to be more to the game than this. But the decks are crafted in such a way, and the way that you kind of go through this Camp Grizzly deck, obviously after every player's gone, you're going to turn over a Camp Grizzly card, means that you're cycling through that fairly quickly. That means there's more opportunity that an Otis Strikes card is going to come out, or something's going to happen which is going to move Otis into your location. And suddenly you get to this stage where you think, the tipping point goes from thinking, I'm going to storm through this, to you have these real cinematic moments where you're brushing towards the kind of the location, be it the barn or the boathouse, etc. And you think, I've got everything I need, and something invariably will happen, which means Otis is going to rush there, somebody's going to get killed, or you're going to get moved to another part of the map. You're going to have to drop stuff. You may not be able to move as quickly as you want to, because the wonderful kind of Camp Grizzly deck is crafted in such a way, no matter how many cards are in here or how random it is, it's going to have an effect on the game. And also, with it being a true co-op game, you have to make those difficult decisions. So, you know, three of you may be in the location, and one of you may be injured and hanging 3 or 4 kind of cabins back, and it's going to take you 4 turns to get there, and you know that every turn or every round that you're going to get, a number of the Camp Grizzly cards drawn. Do you make the decision to go for the finale and leave the person behind? Or do you wait for that person to catch up? Do you try and help that person? Do you try and get them some aid? And all the time, of course, Otis is coming towards you, and it creates these wonderful false endings where you think hope is there, and then suddenly all hope is lost. And then, of course, you have the fantastic finale as well. Of course, the survival cards help, and these are great. You get either the permanent or the single-use effects there, and they can be really, really useful if timed correctly. And then you will get to the finale, and then you will do the finale, and maybe you will win. So let's talk about that finale, because for me that is potentially a bit of an anticlimactic end to the game. I understand why it's there, of course I understand why it's there, and it adds a little minigame element to the end for the survivors. But the fact is, in the base game of Camp Grizzly, is there are only 8 finale cards, and that means that invariably you're going to encounter the same. The more you play the game, you're going to encounter the same finales, and it just feels a little bit the fact that I wish they would have included more. Now I know in the expansions you can get other finale cards, but this should have a deck with quite a few different finales in there. It would be great to kind of randomly choose them and find out what happens. For example, let's have a look at this. This is a boat finale, and it's called Sharks and Minnows. And you have to move the Otis to the 0 on the body count track, then place each counsellor on the body count number that matches their current move. Oh wow, okay. And then you swim from left to right across the body count track. If you reach 13, you're safe. So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to roll the dice, so you're going to roll the d6, and it's going to give you a number moving from the left to the right, and Otis is going to swim towards you. So it's this lovely little mini game that's in there. But the more you play the game, the more these become apparent, and as I say, they're slightly anticlimactic once you play the game over and over, but not enough to dissuade me from playing the game. As I say, as a solo experience, it's not the best solo experience. Playing it with others, I've had an absolute blast every time I've played the game. The artwork is utterly sublime. The mechanisms in the game are simple, and you can teach the game in about 2 minutes flat. the kind of crafting of the decks and the crafting of upgrading your weapons with these various dice, and of course Otis upgrading how he kind of gets stronger through his stalk and his damage and the amount of damage that he gives is utterly wonderful. The longer the game goes on, there's more chance that Otis is going to get stronger and faster. And of course, Otis never really truly dies. He's like one of those relentless bad guys in these kind of films. You know, it doesn't matter how fast you run, he's constantly walking at a pace and still managing to catch up with you, and that's Otis through and through here. I have a load of fun playing Camp Grizzly. It's one of my favourite games. It is a game that I can't totally recommend to solo gamers. If you're purely going to play it solo, you're going to have a good time, but the best time is sharing the experience with friends, unfortunately. And as I say, if you're looking to play a game pure solo, then this really isn't the game for you. There are better games out there that you can play purely as one character and have a more engaging experience. But other than that, I'm so glad that I kind of spent the time and had my levels of patience, which were tested from time to time, where I was like, oh, I know it's only X amount more than I'm willing to spend, but I held back and I bought the game at a price I was happy to pay for the game. Cost is always going to be prohibitive on this game. It's always going to be a bit of a collector's piece. So like all these things, this game is worth what you're willing to pay for it. It's not for me to advise you to kind of, definitely go out there and spend 400 quid or 300 quid. Again, I didn't spend anywhere near that amount on a game. And it's not for me to say that whether you should or shouldn't buy this game. What I will say is that if what you've seen here and everything else that you've read about Camp Grizzly, it looks like the kind of game that you think you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of playing and owning, then hopefully this video is going to help you make an informed decision. But for most people, unfortunately, the kind of scarcity and the price point of it means that unless you're very lucky to have a copy or know someone that's got a copy, unfortunately you won't get to play the game, which is a shame because it is a game that deserves to be played. I wish Ameritrash Games would re-engage. There is an absolute audience for this game, and it would be good to see it relaunched on Kickstarter. Yes, the prices would then crash, and that's okay because this game deserves to be played by anybody. It's pure, simple fun. Thank you very much for joining me on this Cult of the Old journey through Camp Grizzly by Ameritrash Games. I thoroughly enjoy the game when playing with others, but as I say, as a solo gamer, I can't heartily recommend it, which is a bit of a shame, but fortunately it's become one of my wife's favourite games, so it's not a game that doesn't get played in this household. So thank you very much for joining me. This is Not Board Gaming. My name is Mark. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos. And one final thought: if you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye bye.